The Social Security program is relatively straightforward from a high level. You have FICA taxes that are paid by workers and their employers. Those FICA taxes go into the OASDI trust. Those are then paid to retirees. If there's anything left over, it goes into the trust and it gets invested in special issue treasury securities that earn interest to further the program's income. If there are less than tax revenues that are collected than are paid to retirees, then that is taken from the trust principal. So fast forward to today, you have less than tax revenues coming into the OASDI trust that are needed to pay retirees their benefits. And the reason for this is because you have an aging demographic. There are more retirees than there are workers. And so the net effect of that is that there is a deficit, and we're using the trust reserves to make up the difference between what's needed to pay retirees their benefits. It's projected that as of 2033 or 2034, the trust reserves will have been spent down. So what does that mean for retirees in the 2030s? It simply means that there won't be enough in tax revenues to pay them their full retirement benefits. And so it's projected that as of the time that the trust is depleted, there will be enough in tax revenues to pay retirees at that time roughly 77% of their retirement benefits. The good news in all this is that everything that I just said assumes that there will be no reform made to the Social Security program. And there are so many things that they can do, some more painful than others, but there are a lot of different ways that they can make the system solvent. So considering how important Social Security is to American retirees, it's objectively unlikely, at least in my opinion, that there will be no reform made. So for the rest of the video, I'll be reviewing the different proposals being discussed, specifically the ones that would affect retirees and future retirees as opposed to the workforce. And this should give you a pretty good idea of how you might adjust the assumptions that you're making in your retirement planning efforts. So there are generally two broad categories, for how they can, make changes and reform the program to fix our problem. And the first is they can increase the program's income, and so that's another way of saying that they can increase taxes. And then the second would be they can take away from retiree benefits. So what potential changes might have the greatest impact on retirees, so much that it would make sense for people planning for retirement to be considering them? I believe that the cost of living adjustment, the level of monthly benefits, and retirement age, changes to those three categories would have the greatest impact on retirees. And so I'm going to go a bit deeper into each of these categories to help you understand how your situation might be affected. All right, so let's start with the cost of living adjustment. If you're not familiar with what that means, each year when you get Social Security benefits, you get a raise, and that's as prices rise, as we have inflation. The Social Security system increases your benefits to reflect those, increase in prices or the increase in the cost of living. And so you can get all this information, by the way, on the Social Security's website. Just Google, Social Security proposed changes. And so just to give you an idea of what you're looking at, shortfall eliminated, this is really what I pay attention to. This gives you an idea of how much of the problem, of the funding problem, this change might fix or is projected to fix. And so the hardest hitting of all of these different variations of cost of living adjustment changes would be a 1% reduction in your cost of living adjustments in retirement. And so just to give you an idea what that means, so if inflation were 3% in the following year, you would normally get a 3% raise for your benefits. And what this is saying is that if inflation were 3%, you would get a 2% raise. And the impact that this would have over the long run would be substantial. It would fix over half of the funding shortfall. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some variation of this. It might not be 1%. It could be 0.5%. As you can see, even reducing it by 0.5% would fix nearly just under a third of our long-term problem. So in your financial planning or your retirement planning efforts, a way that you can adjust for this or you can plan for this is to simply, model your Social Security income rising by slightly less than what you're spending. And at least that way you're stress testing your plan such that you're, spending more and more from your portfolio, to give you a better idea of whether or not you have enough money or you will have enough money to retire. So the next category would be changes to how benefits are calculated. So changes to the formula that the Social Security Administration uses when they determine how much your full retirement benefit would be. And so this wouldn't necessarily affect those who have already retired. It would most likely affect people who will be retiring and who haven't started already collecting their benefits. And I will say that this category is probably the more complicated of the the different categories that are currently being discussed. So I'll keep this at a relatively high level and try and explain it in terms that you might be able to apply to your own specific situation. But so most of these proposed changes in this category would affect or have a greater impact on those in the higher income category. And so what it does is it involves messing with the formula that they're using to ultimately reduce the full benefits that you might have when you go to retire. So since the formula is specific to each individual, it goes back in time and looks at each year of your historical earnings, and then it runs through a formula to adjust those earnings back to today. I think that since that is pretty complicated, and if you're not interested in going back and actually doing the math to see how your benefits would change, I think the takeaway here is that if your income is towards the higher end of the spectrum compared to the average, I would say that it would be reasonable to expect that you might lose some of your benefits, but to a lesser extent than what's currently projected with no reform, which is a 23% reduction. I would expect maybe something, somewhere between 0 and 20%. But so, in your financial planning efforts, what you might do is, just make different assumptions for, your benefits being slightly lower than what they're currently saying that your benefits will be. So you might assume that, you lose 10% of the benefits that you're expecting to receive, just to see, again, what you're trying to do is you're trying to stress test your plan to understand whether or not you have enough money to support those higher withdrawals because you'll have slightly less income. And finally, the third category that I feel would have an impact on pre-retirees in particular would be an extension of the full retirement age that you're eligible to receive your full retirement benefit. And this has already been done under the Reagan administration when they increased the full retirement age from 65 to the highest full retirement age today, which is 67. And so what they did was they phased it in, and they would most likely do something similar to that if they did, put forth this kind of reform. But so just to give you an idea, we'll go to the change that would have the greatest impact to the funding shortfall, and that would be an increase in the normal retirement age by 3 months per year, right? So we're phasing this in, beginning in 2024 for those who are the age of 62 in 2024 until 2035, at which point the highest full retirement age would be the age of 70. So there are two potential ways that this could affect your retirement planning. The first being that, of course, that the full retirement age would be later. So if you planned on taking your full Social Security benefit, you'd have to wait longer. And then the second, which I feel is probably more impactful, is if you're planning on taking it early, this would presumably result in a greater penalty for that because there are more months to be used in that calculation for the reduction in benefits. And then, alternatively, if you're planning on increasing your full benefit by delaying, right? Today you can delay until the age of 70 and you can increase your benefits, by 24%. And so if you're planning on doing that, if you're in a position where the full retirement age were 70, it would presumably mean that they would no longer offer the delayed credits to those people. Of course, anything can really happen, but that's just me kind of thinking through it logically. But so when you're planning for retirement, you can model different scenarios where either you have a greater penalty, or you're not able to collect delayed credits, or you have fewer years of receiving benefits if you have to wait an extra 2-3 years for to collect if you were to if there were no reforms made. But so these are all different kind of things that you can do. And again, I'll say this for the third time, I think that what you're ultimately trying to do in your retirement planning is to try and understand how much more money it would take in terms of how much savings and personal savings to replace any loss in future Social Security benefits from either a cost of living adjustment reduction, or a lower benefit based on the calculation, or having to delay delay taking it, or not receiving delayed credits. all of these things, they're all doing the same thing. It results in you having to take more money from your portfolio. And so that's what you're trying to understand in your retirement planning is, will you have enough saved to, to be able to retire regardless of whether or not you lose some of your future Social Security benefits. But I hope this was helpful. I think in summary, if there's any takeaway, I think that it's, objectively unlikely that you'll lose a fifth of your retirement benefits for Social Security. But I do think that it's reasonable to expect that you might lose, some of them, in one way or another. And I think that it's important to plan for this potential, so that you're ultimately making a decision or making decisions about retirement that will, maximize your likelihood of, being able to reach all of your long-term goals and reduce your risk of ever running out of money. But I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you were able to, gain some insights that you didn't already know. And, as always, if you feel that you would benefit from a complimentary consultation with me, then I left a link in the description of this video. It will bring you to a page where you just answer a few questions, and it will, if it's appropriate for us to set up a call, then it will bring you to my calendar and we can set up a call. But, I wish you the very best of luck, and I hope to hear from you soon.